Welcome to this edition of Dr. Michael Explains. Today we're going to be discussing Skylar's story. We've had a lot of requests that we put it out there because it was so impactful and it seems to have affected so many lives that we just wanted to share it. And so I've put together this presentation. I've called it the magic of sky water, and the reason I did that is because it really did seem to defy everything I knew clinically speaking. And much like magic, once you understand the science behind it, it takes the mystery out of it. And so what I've done in this series is I've tried to take that science and make it as easily to explain as possible. So here we are, the magic of sky water. My qualifications for background, for starters, is I was graduated as a chiropractor back in September of 1996. And since then I've specialized in alternative care therapies, biofeedback, functional medicine. My wife and I even helped develop some protocols called the emotional recalibration. It's a couples integration protocol. We do computerized nutritional assessment, endocrine stress specialists, and whole body detoxification. We kind of treat the body as a whole, not just as individual components. But in May 28th of 2009, we went to the School of Hard Knocks because Skylar was born with gastroschisis. That is a very debilitating short gut syndrome, emotionally devastating syndrome where the child is literally born inside out. And the biggest complication of that is acute dehydration. And that's kind of what led us to where we are today. In fact, you sitting here in front of your television or your computer watching this. Here's what gastroschisis is. That's Skylar, the day she was born. In that tube is stomach, liver, pancreas, spleen, small intestine, large intestine, bladder, right ovary. They had been tucking it all back in. And what was left was in this tube. Now, it's interesting to note that as swollen as this is, when they talk about an inflamed bowel, this should be a lot smaller, narrower, a little bit bigger than this, kind of the diameter of a pencil. And you can see it's about the diameter of a finger. When this happened, we were just completely devastated, and we didn't know what to do, and so we just hung on for dear life. And here's a picture of Skylar literally hanging onto my finger. She was really tiny. At which point I had decided that I was going to step up to the plate, and I promised her that whatever it took I would do, and short of moving heaven and earth, if I could, I would. Well, just when you think things can't get worse, they often do. And here you see where the bowel actually ruptured, and she got fecal contamination of the abdominal cavity and in all kinds of infections. Here she was hooked up to all of the equipment. She went through 2 different colostomies and a resection. She was in the hospital for a year and a full year, 2 weeks shy of her first birthday, actually. Then when she came home, she was on feeding tubes, feeding ports. That right there is a Mickey button. My daughter asked, is that a Mickey? Is that a Disney souvenir? It's definitely not a Disney souvenir. That's where it actually goes right straight through the stomach. And we would force feed her. To say that it was overwhelming was an understatement. We thought once we finally brought her home with 100 hours a week of home health care. It was unbelievable. Some of our trials had just begun. Here she looks like an angel, quite literally. She's got the most amazing blue eyes I've ever seen. But with acute dehydration syndrome, you can have a good day, and then the body just shuts down, and it almost excretes water. And this is her just a few hours later after we had revived her at the hospital. When we left the hospital originally, they said, hey, you have to weigh her every few hours. If she starts to lose weight, get in the car, drive straight to the hospital, and don't wait for the paramedics to get there because they won't know how to get an IV into her, so just head straight here. If you call 911, get a police escort. Well, that happened, and I called Scottish Rite, and I was stunned when the emergency room doctors met me at the valet for the children's hospital and took her out of the car. At that moment, I knew this was a bad deal. Triage is the way that they rank mortality rates and who's got the worst wounds. Well, if you have an emergency room doctor taking your child out of the car, that's a really bad day. When that happened, I became a hydration expert by default. We tried waters, water filters, ionizers, nutrition, alkaline water machines, alkaline water ionizers. I have been through the gamut of them. I have personally owned and or used more than 8 different water machines. I ended up with heavy metal issues, corrosion, a lot of mold in my whole family. And that's where I became an opponent of alkaline water ionizers. I am to this day. The water that we ended up using comes from what's called electrolyzed reduced water, and it's alkaline by default. It means that, it just happens because the water's worked. But you can have alkaline water in a lot of different forms, and I'll discuss that in a moment. To say that we were having a rough time with Skylar is a bit of an understatement. She was on force feed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She had liquid stools constantly. Every morning was literally a nightmare. If we didn't catch it just in time, it went all through the bed, the blankets, the stuffed animals. We actually had a piece of plastic underneath the crib so that it didn't ruin the carpet again. In the meantime, she suffered with severe distension, a lot of gas, a lot of cramping. The diaper rash she had was so bad, it looked like when you open a package of hamburger and you flip it over, it's all weepy. They gave us this Ilex, which is an industrial grade diaper rash cream that looked like silicone caulking that you use on your bathtub. Anyways, on top of that, we couldn't get away. We had absolutely no downtime because nobody really you couldn't really just have somebody come in and sit other than nurses. And so it was a rough time for us. And then there was Amy and her SD501. It was kind of funny. She came into my office on October 12th and she's like, "Oh, you got to try our water. It's different." I'd already been through so many water ionizers. I was pretty much the expert. So we argued, we debated, we bantered back and forth. And as God would have it, fate would have it, whatever, Amy was laying on the table when we got the bad news about Skylar. Her test results had come back in and she had failure to thrive, anemia, blood in the stool, poor fat and protein metabolism. She was basically at failure to thrive. And Amy pipes up and says, "Dr. Michael, Skylar doesn't have to suffer because you're too stubborn to try the water. I'll give it to you for free." Not the thing to say to a parent who's tried as much as we had. We have been through everything with Scottish Rite, alternative, water, you name it. And I was really insulted, but I kept my mouth shut, and it was one of those moments where that still small voice inside says, "Just listen." So I had that, okay, fine, I'll sit down, but I'm standing up on the inside kind of mentality. I said, "Look, I'm done arguing with you this. Bring me your water. I'll give it to her. I'll cross my T's. I'll dot my I's. In 30 days, when we run these tests, I'll prove to you that it doesn't work." And sure enough, within 10 minutes, we had a jug, and I was like, wow, this lady's incredible. So end of the day, I took it home, handed it to my wife, and said, "Here's the water for Skylar. It's from Amy. Just let her try it." And I explained what was going on, and we didn't really have anything else to do or try because we had been doing everything else. There was nothing else left. There was no stone unturned. There was no new barrel to dig to the bottom of. We were at that. And within 4 short days, I was eating crow for breakfast and needed some water to wash it down. Amy had given us the water on a Thursday, and on Monday, the charge lasts 3 or 4 days. But in that 4 days, 80% of her symptoms were gone. The belly had softened up. The C. diff, the smell had started to dissipate. The cramping was gone. The bowel sounds were gone. In fact, in 10 days, I was shaving, and I heard her scream and say that there was a snake in the bathroom, and I went running. And it was her first solid bowel movement. She actually thought that a snake had crawled out of her belly. 6 months after that, we removed all the feeding ports, which was just mind-boggling. And the difference with the SD501 is it produces a medical grade water that's called electrolyzed reduced water. It sure felt like a cure. It was a miracle in our minds. The reality of it is it was just simple science. It did not cure Skylar. There were a lot of pieces to Skylar's puzzle. The water was, and to this day still is, 72% of her puzzle. And by that I mean, if she doesn't drink fresh Kangen water, her stool will loosen up. She doesn't have an ileocecal valve. She's got bacterial issues because of what she's been through. They removed 17 centimeters of her bowel. But simply put, electrolytes reduced water gives you the best possible 72% of your body to work with to facilitate the nutrition, detoxification, energy, health, healing. Electrolytes reduced water is basically active oxygen, molecular hydrogen, hydroxyl anions with a high ORP. To this day, I have tested a lot of machines, and the SD501 tests out the best. The biggest standard I use is Skylar. It either works or it doesn't. Like I said, it's not a cure, it's just science. It realistically may save your life, but if you don't make healthy choices, your health benefits will not be as effective and they won't last as long. Like I said, it's not going to cure you. It's going to provide your cells with the necessary tools that they need to do their job. Within 6 months, this was Skylar, a little ballerina. It's hard to believe that 6 months prior to these pictures, she was on feeding tubes. This is more recent, straight to the top. That's her rock climbing. She is 5 years old. There is nothing that holds this girl back. This was some pictures we had done recently this fall. She's just a pistol. She lives life to the fullest, and she's about as sweet a child as you can imagine. And there she is today. So why the water? Well, the difference between the healthiest person and the sickest person is basically broken down into 2 parts. Your muscles, ligaments, bone, organs, tissues, minerals, all these things add up to 28% of the patient, or the person. The other 72% of every person on the planet is just water. What we found out is not all water is equal. We know, we tried them. Distilled water, reverse osmosis water, filtered water, alkaline water, ionized water, alkaline ionized water. And then there's something that's called electrolytes reduced water. You can research this in PubMed. Don't waste your time on Google. If you're Googling all this stuff, you're going to get confused. If you do a PubMed search for electrolytes reduced water, you'll be astounded at the level of research. Electrolytes reduced water is very different from alkaline ionized water. Electrolytes reduced water is water that's been zapped with enough electricity to break it apart, and that releases molecular hydrogen, active oxygen, hydroxyl anions, and gives it a very high oxidative reduction potential. This all leads to superior hydration for the athlete, for the health conscious, and for the sick. All water, alkaline ionized water, is not electrolyzed or reduced. But all electrolyzed reduced water is alkaline by default because of these hydroxyl anions. It's a huge difference. So once we started using it for Skylar, we started using it for all the kids. Our daughter Jackie suffered from dehydration headaches. Not anymore. Connor trains unbelievably hard at gymnastics, 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, with little to no lactic acid buildup. In fact, it's the only thing Lexi or Sky have really drank in 5 years. This is our daughter Jackie, as she is 16, trying out for college for goalkeeper. She's an exceptional goalkeeper, and she was one of the youngest goalkeepers to actually make the Olympic development team at 10 years old. Unfortunately, she had to quit because of our scheduling conflicts with Skylar. Connor just took first place in the state of Georgia in his division for gymnastics. He's going to compete in regionals in West Palm Beach, Florida. He's quite a dude. The handstand there, Lexi loves to photobomb Connor. They get along really well. Lexi is our dancing star. She is exceptional, and she loves it. High energy, full bore, all the way at everything. Skylar would say that Daddy kept his promise to move heaven and earth. And we've used this to try and help everybody else understand that they need to just give it a try.